Alfreda, would you tell us about your date of birth, where you were born, and about your parents and your family?
Well, I was born in Oneida, and my name is Alfreda Emma Smith Green. And my parents were, my father was Milton Smith, and my mother was Marina Smith. Dockstader Smith, I guess I should have said.
Okay. Born at the homestead? Your father's, your grandfather?
I don't remember, but I imagine I was born at home.
Okay, where was that located?
I should have said I don't remember what my mother told me. Because, pardon me, where was it located?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure about that either.
Okay.
Because I think when my father and mother first married, they were either living with her parents or his parents, so it could have been either place.
I see. All right, then tell me your grandparents. Do you remember their names?
Yes, on my father's side was Leonard Smith, and my grandmother was Olive Cornelius Smith. And my mother's parents were Chauncey Dockstader and Emma King Dockstader.
Now, where was the, I guess, where would we call the homestead that you remember on either one of your grandparents?
Where Chester Gordon lives now.
Who?
Chester Gordon Smith, my cousin.
Chester Smith?
Mm-hmm.
Is he a junior or
Yes, he's a junior.
Okay. That was the homestead?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's the one I remember first.
Okay, tell me about that place. What do you remember about that?
Oh, that's
And that was located just past the
Methodist Church.
Methodist Church.
Next to the cemetery.
Going towards the health center. Okay.
Well, I remember it always seemed like it was a huge, beautiful house to me. My grandmother didn't work out, and my grandfather worked his farm, and she always, I don't know, like kept her house up. She had her floors painted, like I said, and she had the latest furniture and things that she considered modern at that time, and she always made most of her own clothes, her rugs, and all the decorations in the house. She just mostly made them. And she was I remember my grandmother more than I do my grandfather, because she's the one that taught me a lot. I remember her teaching me about church, going to church, and she taught me how I should treat my sisters and my brothers, and she told me a little bit about her childhood. I don't remember too much about it, but I remember that she was a very strict person. And
can you remember any of the things besides that she told you?
No, not really.
Did she tell you about where she went to school?
No. But I remember my father going to school in Hampton, Carlisle. And my grandmother, I don't know where she went to school, and my grandfather, I don't know where he went to school either. I don't remember that.
Give me a kind of a physical description of your grandfather. What do you see when you think of him? Is he a big man?
Yeah, he was a big man, and he had rheumatism, and I remember he always had to have a cane. And my grandmother was a fairly large person too, and she was a very, like I said, a very devout Methodist person, and she went to church all the time. My grandfather took her to church, but he didn't go to church himself. And I remember when we would come to visit them, we didn't always stay with them, that my dad, my father and my mother would, like if we learned school plays or songs at school, that we had it performed before my mother, my grandfather and my grandmother, because he was showing us off, I guess, what we could do and what we learned at school and things like that. So it was kind of, we just thought it was great that we could perform without criticism.
Tell me your names of your brothers and sisters.
Well, do you want some ones that died too?
Sure.
Well, Edith, my sister Edith was the oldest one. And then I am next to her. And then my brother Dean. Wait a minute. I think there was one that died between my brother Dean and I. His name was Merville. And then my brother Dean and my brother Sylvester.
That's the one they used to call Big Sal?
Uh-huh. And Urban. And then I had a brother named Robin, and he was in the service, and he contacted some kind of, I don't know what it was. Anyway, he died at a young age, say around 25 or 26. And then I had another sister, Priscilla, in there. I think she was after Sal. And then Becky, she's the youngest one.
Now, where do you remember growing up in terms of, with your family?
Well, mostly at my grandparents, Smith, Leonard Smith and all.
And that was up by the, like you say, on...
by the Methodist Church. And then I remember my grandfather, Dockstader, we stayed there once in a while too.
Where were they located?
By where the airport is now. They own land out there.
Okay, on which side of the airport? The Green Bay side or on the Oneida side would be?
On the Oneida side, I guess.
More towards Oneida?
Mm-hmm. Because their house was not too far from that bar that's on 172. I don't remember what the name of it is even. But it wasn't. Yeah, it used to be. There was a bar then at that time. I think it was Joyce's Bar or something like that. But I remember that place there, and I remember my mother's parents lived a little ways from there.
Oh, from the bar.
Oh, maybe about 2 miles or something. And
what kind of work did your grandparents do on your mother's side?
I think my grandfather worked at the brickyard, Hawkers, and he used to walk to work anyway from there. And my grandmother, I don't remember her working out at all. She just stayed home, took care of her family, I guess.
The most that I can remember is when did your family move over on not H but Ranch Road?
Let's see. I was just starting my first year in high school, so I must have been about.
You had lived someplace else before?
Yeah, we lived with my grandparents.
Oh, no, before that. Then you moved over there.
Mm-hmm.
I see. And what kind of work did your dad do?
He was common labor. He did, like, when we were growing up, I can remember he did work cutting wood and logs and stuff like that. So we lived in Tigerton and Boulder. And
you moved around quite a bit then.
And I understand that when they were first married, that he worked up in Minnesota in the woods in Michigan, and I guess lumberjacks was working in the woods. Being a lumberjack was about the only type of work that was available at the time.
Now, when you moved over on Ranch Road, you said you were about a junior,
14.
Freshman in high school? About what year was that? Do you remember?
If you...
That'd be in the 30s?
Yeah, it was during the Depression. It would be like 24 and 14, be 28 about.
Is that location one of the places where they call the New Deal?
Uh-huh, yes.
Tell me what you understand about that.
I understood that they were allotted, my father and mother were allotted 20 acres of land there, and a home, there was a home built there, but someone else lived there before they did. And they really didn't take care of the place or anything, and it was just that one big mud hole. You couldn't even drive into the driveway. I don't remember too much about the New Deal. I guess I was a teenager and didn't pay much attention to what was going on.
Okay, let's back up a little bit then. Where did you start going to school?
Let me see now. The first school I went to, I think it was up in Tagerton, or when we lived in Tagerton, was a country school. And I remember we walked to school. But I guess I haven't thought about these things for so long that I just get kind of vague after a while.
But during the course of your schooling, when you were younger, you went to public school. You didn't go to government school?
No, there wasn't. If there was any available, we didn't know about it, and my parents didn't want us to go anyhow. So
Now you say they didn't want you to go. Did they tell you? Did they tell you that they didn't want you to go, and they give you a reason?
Well, I guess the only reason that I thought of at the time was that they didn't want to be separated from us. They wanted us to be with them, as far as I know.
Did you say your father went to Hampton, or was that your grandfather?
My father.
He went to Hampton.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of feelings or comments did he have about the government school?
He didn't like it. And one of the reasons why was because they, I hate to say this, but he didn't like the blacks being put in going to school at the same school with the black people. And there used to be a lot of fighting. He used to tell us about the fights that they used to have. I don't know if he got kicked out of school or he just quit. But anyhow, I don't even know how long he went there.
And your mother, she went to public school then?
I think she went to that government school where the seminary is now.
Oh, in Oneida?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
I don't know how long.
Do you have any idea why your dad would go to Hampton and your mother would go to government school? They both went to school about the same time, right?
No, my father was 20 years older than my mother.
Oh, he was?
So,
okay.
So, I don't know, maybe that's just where they sent them at the time.
That could be. I thought they might have been going to school at the same time.
Oh, no.
Okay. Wow, your dad married a
young
gal, eh?
Yes.
Okay then, you moved around quite a bit when you went to school.
Mm-hmm.
How'd you like school?
Well, it was okay. I never had any problems with it, and I never had any, school was not difficult for me. And I never could understand why people have trouble in school. Although I didn't finish high school either. But during the war.
Came pretty good for you then, or pretty
Yeah.
easy for you.
Mm-hmm.
What about your mother and father? They both spoke the Oneida language.
My mother spoke Oneida language, but my father didn't. I grew up in my grandparents' house, like I said, mostly at Leonard Smith. And he never allowed anyone to talk the Oneida language in the house. And my father was against it too, and he always, when we would visit, I remember when we visited my grandparents on my mother's side, they spoke Oneida among themselves, and he would be real upset because he thought they would be talking about him and he wouldn't know it. So,
Well,
it
sometimes
was
they
kinda-
probably did.
yeah, and so then it was really hard, like after you don't realize it at the time, but after you grow up, like you're living in two worlds. Your parents tell you this and then somebody else tells you that, you know, about your heritage and all that. So it's really kind of hard to cope with.
So you never had the opportunity to use or learn the Oneida language then?
Well, I had an opportunity because when, I don't know if you remember Floyd Lonesbury, he used to teach Oneida classes at the Methodist Hall, the hall out there, and we did go to some of the classes that he had, my sister and I, and a bunch of them from the other end area. So I wouldn't say that we didn't have the opportunity, but I don't think that the program was on long enough for us to really, learn anything from it.
You made reference to the other end. What does that mean?
Pardon
To
me?
somebody that doesn't know, when you say the other end, what does that mean? To you, what does it mean?
When I grew up, my grandparents always referred to the Episcopal Church area as down below, or the other end. And they referred to us as the other end. So I don't know what ends they were talking about.
You're just on one end or the other.
Yeah, I imagine they were referring to the reservation, I suppose. I don't know.
Okay. Now, you say once you moved over on Ranch Road, your dad had 20 acres and your mother had 20 acres?
No, they had 20 acres together.
Together, okay.
Mhm.
And did he have any, seems like I can remember some cattle or some horses or something like that.
Yeah, he had horses and he had enough, usually one cow anyway, enough to furnish the family with milk and butter, but once in a while he would sell milk.
What about electricity?
Oh yeah, he had electricity. We were my grandfather, when he was living on in his house there, he was the first one in that area to have electricity. So, and my dad would do the same thing naturally. So, we were one of the first ones that had electricity put in our house.
What about water? Did you have to haul water, or did you have?
Oh yeah, we had a pump that
pump?
pumped water.
Okay. Was your activities on like every other family? Saturday was wash day, or you had one day that you took care of those things?
Mm-hmm. Well, Saturday wasn't a wash day for us; it was baking day.
Oh yeah. Well, tell me about that.
Well, it seemed like that we grew up with the idea that you baked on Saturday, you cleaned your house on Saturday, and because Sunday you might have visitors, and you had to provide food for them, and you didn't want them to see your mess in the house, so you had to clean that up. So, but we never had any regular scheduled day. I don't remember for wash day. Maybe Monday and iron on Tuesday, and like.
All right, then tell me what a typical Sunday would be like then.
We usually went to church. We walked to the Methodist church.
This is from Ranch Road?
Mm-hmm.
You walked?
Yeah, we were growing up during the Depression era, during the war, so we were lucky if we had gasoline and tires to go to work with, much more go to church with, I guess, priorities. So
that's a long walk.
It is, but we
Probably
never
didn't
thought
seem
much
like it at the time.
because a bunch of us would go together.
All right, you went to church. Then what happened? You come
Pardon me?
after church.
Oh, well, we usually had our Sunday dinner, and everybody did their own thing in the afternoon. And Sometimes we put puzzles together, and sometimes we just read. But I was pretty quiet, unless we had company. Then.
Did you have a radio?
Oh yeah. I could remember our first radio we had was run off a car battery. And so my dad would have to get the battery out of the car in order for us to listen to the radio. And finally they come up with these dry cell, I think they're called. They were big batteries, about so big.
Well, they didn't have that pink bunny at the time?
That in what?
That pink bunny that just...
No, I don't remember him.
Okay.
And then the different places that we lived in didn't always have electricity either, so then we kind of stuck with our battery radio.
Okay.
We
Right. Go ahead.
we usually had our big meal in the evening, and we listened to those stories on the radio that used to come on, like Jack Armstrong. I don't remember the other ones now. But they used to have stories that came on the radio in the evening, and during supper we'd listen to them. It was kind of a fun time. Like, of course, we had work to do too. When we came home from school, it was our job to haul in the wood and get my mother water. We had to get her enough water for her next day, and if she was going to wash, then we had to haul extra water.
Your stove, she had a wood stove that you cooked from? Mm-hmm. With the reservoir on the side?
Yeah.
About the ironing, do the same thing with the ironing?
Well,
How'd you do that? Remember that?
yes. Put the irons on the stove, heat them up, and then iron. My mother was a very, I don't know what you call it. Anyway, she always insisted that her ironing board is nice and clean, and she had to put new covers on them every so often, and then she would iron, or else have us iron, and we had to be careful so we wouldn't burn everything. You know, if your iron gets too hot, you go like that to see how hot it is.
What happens when you let your clothes that you had sprinkled too long?
It'd get moldy. Well, she didn't do that. She didn't. She made sure that if she didn't have time to do it, she would dry them out. And then when we got refrigerators, there was also a refrigerator. You could stick them in, you know, for a while, for a couple of days. But she mostly ironed right off the line. When she'd take her clothes down, then she'd have her ironing board up, and she used to do pillowcases and sheets and everything. And I used to think, when I think of it now, I think to myself, how did my mother ever iron all these things? Because I don't do it. I put it in a dryer.
Tell me about the time. Okay, you started high school once you moved to over on Ranch Road there. Did you go to grade school at all before there? Right around.
Well, I went to Silvery Summit, and then I went from high school to high school from there, because that was closest to my grandfather's place. That's the only school that I can remember of going to. I went to West Superior. Yeah.
Okay.
And I went also into grade school in Chicago Corners. But I don't really remember how come I was going to school there. Oh, I remember now. We were living in a house by Fish Creek Road. That's the one that comes from Chicago Corners, right, and goes up to the ridge. We were living on that road. That's how come we went to school in Chicago Corners. That old lady they used to call Gun Hit. Did you ever hear?
Gun Hit.
She had a house back of her house, and we lived there. It was kind of a little village there. And then our house burned down. Then we moved in with our uncle, and he lived where Amelia Cornelius's house is now.
Up on the ridge then?
No, where Julius and Hazel Julia Summers and Hazel
Oh, right
lived.
on the corner there?
Yeah, that house next to
Oh, okay.
where Amelia lived. That's where she lived. And then my uncle had a house there, so he was a bachelor.
Is that
So
Aaron?
we moved in with him, and then from there we went back to my grandparents again.
What was your uncle's name?
Sam Cornelius.
Oh, Sam Cornelius, okay.
That was my
Okay.
grandma's brother.
Tell me what you told me what a Sunday would be like. You'd go to church and then you'd have a meal when you come home, and your mother did a lot of baking on Saturdays. What about holidays? Tell me what a Christmas would be like.
Well, it was very exciting when we were children, I know. We always had a Christmas tree, and I remember one Christmas I wrote to Santa Claus, and I wanted a doll, and I even put a picture on there and put it on my stocking. And the next morning, I didn't get the doll, of course, and he had a note on there. He said, by the time I got to your house, I didn't have any dolls left, And after I thought about it, after I discovered there wasn't any Santa Claus, I knew that my mother or father had written that note. But being a young person, I accepted that. I mean, I wasn't resentful because I didn't get what I ordered. But it always was a great time for us. We always had a good time.
Who got the Christmas tree?
Pardon me?
Who would go get the Christmas tree?
My father. And they never put it up until, well, Santa Claus was supposed to be the one that put up the tree, so they never put it up until we went to bed on Christmas Eve. And they always told us if we didn't go to sleep that Santa Claus wouldn't come either. So, there were years I remember that we decorated the tree with popcorn and anything else that we could find to decorate with, and we never had any lights on there. But it was a tree, and it was always a fun time at our house. And when we were growing up, had that.
What about New Year's? Hoyan?
I don't remember too much about that, except that my mother made donuts.
Do you know why she made donuts?
Well, usually she said people would come around and you're supposed to share your food with anyone who comes to the door, and it was an old custom. That's about all I remember about it.
Okay. What about Easter? Was that a special day too?
Not especially, not when we were kids. I don't remember anything special about Easter. After I started going to church and understood a little bit more about the different holidays, and we'd have dinner. I guess that's about it. But there was no emphasis put on what it was for. So I never did really understand it until I went to church with my grandmother.
When you were growing up with your grandparents or your parents, did they have any kind of thing that they used, any old medicines or things when somebody got sick?
Well, yes, I remember my grandmother always chewed sweet flag. I have no idea what sweet flag is really, but I remembered I tasted it once. It was real bitter, some kind of root. And then she used, I think she might have used the leaves, sweet flag leaves for tea if a person got sick. It tasted awful anyway. I'd like to tell her I was sick.
Maybe that's what cured you.
Right. And I remember when we were children that my mother used to use, it makes me sick to think about it, skunk grease they called it. She'd put a little bit in a spoon and put a little bit of sugar in there, and then we would have to drink that or eat it, swallow it for a sore throat and a cold. And there's probably others, but I can't think of them right now.
Did your parents do any kind of your parents or your grandparents? Did they do any kind of like beading or basket making or rug making or?
Oh, my grandmother made rugs. She made all her own rugs for the house. She'd make some great big ones for the living room and for her bedrooms upstairs and down. And my mother made baskets. She could make baskets like nobody's business, and sometimes that was our excuse me. Then was our living, like she would make those big hampers, and then she would sell them, and then she'd be able to buy groceries.
Did she pass that on to any of her children?
I guess not, because I never was interested in working in anything like that.
Do you have any of her baskets left?
I don't think so. She used to make Hulkorn baskets too. I guess there's a special knack to making those because you have to make the openings big enough for the hulls to go through when you wash them. And I can remember when she made corn soup, we would kind of move out of the house and move down by the creek, and she'd make a fire and cook her corn and stuff.
Tell me about that.
And well, it was handy. See, we had to haul all our own water, and you have to use a lot of water in order to get the ashes out of the corn soup. So then we'd go where there was running water, and then she'd wash her corn that way. It was a nice outing for us.
How long would that take? Maybe.
I don't know.
Maybe a day, half a day.
Probably half a day or so.
And you would help her with those.
Well, I guess we'd help. Probably just get in the way, but we were pretty small.
She made the corn with the ashes at the time.
Uh-huh.
Was the white corn soup was that was that something that was special, or did you have that on a regular basis?
No, it was special, and it seemed like when anyone was sick or something, then they would usually give them corn soup. They would consider that part of their medicine, I suppose.
Well, in that respect, were there any kind of medicine or curing things that you can remember your parents or your grandparents participating in?
Well, I remember my sister had eczema real bad, Edith, and my parents would use sumac. My dad would go and pick the sumac. My mother would peel the bark off and use the inside, she'd scrape it off and make a tea or poultice for her. I don't know if it helped or not. I don't remember that much about it. I do remember that my brother Dean had St. Vitus dance when he was a little child. And my parents said that they told me that they went to see Dr. Hittner, and he told them that they should go to the medicine man because he couldn't do anything for Dean. He said he didn't know that much about St. Vitus dance. So Garrett Johnson, remember him?
I didn't know him, but I
he
know
was
the name.
Considered an Indian doctor. He lived in Chicago Corners there, where Carol and Everett Cornelius live now, somewhere in that area.
Big Goose Town.
And he treated my brother. But we weren't allowed to see what was going on. I mean, I remember that my dad had to have certain kind of wood. He'd use the ashes for that, for some part of his treatment, and they had to have corn soup plus Christmas candy. I have no idea what they did with it. But he wanted mixed hard candy, and he treated him, and he seemingly got over it. I mean, he used to, he wouldn't be able to see in where it was light. You had to keep him where it was dark all the time, and then he was, didn't eat much. And after the they treated him for, I don't know if it was over a period of years or several times, I don't remember that much about it, that he seemed to have gotten over it.
But he had this when he was young.
Yes, he was about, I would say maybe 2 or 3, maybe older, around that age anyway. He was just a little guy anyhow. He was never well. It seemed like there was always something wrong with him, and after he was treated by the Indian doctor, he seemed to revive and get back his strength.
Did you know what it meant by the St. Vitus dance?
No, I don't know what it is.
Okay.
All I know is that Dr. Hittner told my folks that he couldn't treat it. It had to be treated by a Native American doctor.
Gordon, how do you spell that? Is it like V-I? Is that what you're saying? Or are you saying F-I? Vitus?
St. Vitus.
Vitus?
It starts with a V, I think it is.
Like a V-I-D-A-S or T?
I would say TAS.
It's. I've seen it in medical books, but it's described as some kind of a nerve disease, I guess.
It's like almost not a paralysis, but it affects your nervous system.
I knew of another lady that he treated too. That was Carol Skinadar. She used to Zach Skinnadar's sister, Z-Rom's auntie, like, and she would kept moving around all the time, and the teacher at school used to get after her because she couldn't sit still. She'd just keep moving. I guess they would probably call it hyper person nowadays. But Garrett treated her, and she got over it. And he said that a snake was bothering her. I don't understand all this, but when you think about it, she did act like it. Just continually moving, and just. And my brother, he said a bear was bothering him. That's why he'd eat in the evenings, and then he couldn't see in the real bright light. And he said a bear was bothering him. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
that's why they have. You spoke about the food that they brought in, and that's probably why they brought that kind of food in, because the bear likes that kind of food.
I suppose. I don't know. I often wondered about that, but we weren't allowed to watch the ceremonies, like I said.
Okay. Let's talk about. You went to West Superior,
Mm-hmm.
and that seemed to be. You enjoyed the high school pretty good then.
Well, yeah, although I didn't finish. I went 3 years, and then I quit during the war, in 40, 41.
What happened when you quit? What did you do then?
Oh, I stayed home for a while and got a job in Green Bay.
What did you do there?
Let me see. I worked at, I think it's Schilling's Fish Company, packing smoked fish to be shipped overseas for the soldiers. And then I went to Detroit, and I worked there for about 3 months and didn't like it, so I came back home again.
How'd you get up to Detroit? I mean, there had to be a link there somewhere.
My aunt was there, my Aunt Rebecca.
Rebecca.
Doc Stater. Williams, she was when she had married Everett Williams, but she wasn't married at the time.
And she was living up there?
She was living there.
What was she doing, do you remember?
I think she was doing housework, like for different ones.
And you went to Detroit,
Uh-huh.
and you didn't like it.
No.
What didn't you like?
No. Everything was too unfamiliar, too big a place where I decided to come home.
Okay, we come home.
Not really too much fun working either, I guess.
When you came home, tell me then.
Well, let's see. Didn't do much of anything. Worked for Larson's. Remember they used to have weeding. They used to hire the high school kids to weed. And then in the spring we'd pick asparagus and pick beans and everything else around the neighborhood just to earn some money. And then I was 19 when I got married. So.
Did you used to also go up to pick berries, cherries?
Oh yeah, we went to pick cherries too. That used to be we used to call it our poor man's vacation. We had to work, but we could go swimming in the, get to go swimming and get around in that area anyhow.
Can you remember where you'd go with Orchard?
Let me see. We went to, they used to call it Liddy Bennett's camp. I think it was in Fish Creek. And we also went to, let's see, I think that was Ullman. I remember too, my mother and dad used to go to some place called Camp 1 and Camp 2. I don't know where it was though, but they used to have several camps there.
What do you remember about Liddy Bennett's camp?
Just hard work.
Do you remember anything about her?
About her? No, I remember when I was a kid, I used to be kind of scared of her. And I knew that she was Prudence's mother. That's about all that I knew about her. She always seemed so somber, and she dressed in black all the time. And it was kind of scary.
Okay, then you got married.
Mm-hmm.
And
I lived, after my husband and I got married, we went to Chicago for a while. Didn't like it there, so he didn't like it there, so we came home.
what was his name?
Carl
Carl.
Danforth. He's Leslie's brother. And then he was working on Potter's Marsh in Wisconsin Rapids. So then we moved up there, and we stayed up there about 18 years.
18 years.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Our oldest daughter was 18 when he died, and
And what's her name?
Marina. And then our youngest girl, Carol, she was in high school. She was 16 when he got killed in an automobile accident.
Okay.
I'm going to stop you.
Whole time, the things that you want to share with us.
Okay, Gordy, we're up and running anytime again.
Okay. From the time that you were up in, would you say Marshfield?
Wisconsin Rapids.
Oh, Wisconsin Rapids, I'm sure.
Mhm.
And your husband had an accident and was killed.
Yeah.
And what happened after that then?
Well, Carol was still in high school, so then we stayed on the marsh. The boss there let us stay rent-free, and he paid our fuel and everything for us. And I did housework in town to keep us going. And we lived on Carol's Social Security that she got from her father after he died of her father's death. And we stayed there about a year. Anyway, she graduated at Port Edwards High School there. And then we moved back to Oneida here. Met Alan Green and married him, and we've been married about 33 years now.
And where are you residing now?
Where were we living?
Yeah, where do you?
We were living out from 54 next to his mother and dad. You know where the log cabin was, where August Firm's house was, Jeff Cornelius? We lived on that road back of them.
That's where you're residing now?
No, we're living on Lambie Road now with my daughter, Carol. We lived there about over 20 years, I know. And then we had a little house down there. And
Do you have any grandchildren?
I have 6 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren.
And what did you, after you married Alan and did you take up any kind of work that you did, or?
Oh yeah, I worked in a post office. I worked there, when during the time that I was working in the post office, we were in an automobile accident and I shattered my ankle and I've never been able to, it's never really healed. And so then I had to take a disability after, I think I worked about 14 years. And then I was approached by one of the tribal members to go to GED classes to get my high school diploma. So I did that because they wanted to start a class, and they not that I was enthused about going to school, but they wanted to start a class, and they had to have so many members in order to start the class. That was from Fox Valley Tech. So then I enrolled, and I got my diploma. And then I was asked if I wouldn't work with the GED students out here for Fox Valley. And I said, no, I don't want to work, with them. I said, they probably know more than I do. So my daughter was living out in California, and I told them, I said, and besides, I'm going on vacation. Well, you think about it while you're gone and let us know. Then they approached me again, and then Sister Tony, she talked to me too, and she wanted me to help her set up classes. And the reason why, they told me the reason why that I was picked, and there was other graduates from the class, and I said, well, why don't you ask one of them? They're probably smarter than I am, and I don't know how to teach. And I said, you'd be surprised what you can do if you, how much you did accumulate, like through the years, how much knowledge. And they said, well, you were one of the higher, your grade was one of the highest ones there, so they wanted to know if you would do it. Well, I was able to get through GED in about 6 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that. It didn't take me long anyway. And so then I decided I'd try it. And I worked for Fox Valley Tech then for about 18 years, and I'm retired now.
When did you start working with the guild,
With the
church?
I've been in the Altar Guild about 20 years now.
So you left the Methodist church and you...
Well, when Alan and I got married, he wanted me to join his church, and
He belonged to the Stone Church? The Episcopal Church?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then after I joined, we used to go to church. Then after I joined the church, now he didn't go. He quit going to church. He thought I'd go in his place. And I belonged to that Episcopal Churchwomen's group for about the same amount of time, about 20 years.
Tell me the function of the women's, was it the Women's Guild or?
The ECW?
ECW, okay.
But
What does that mean?
That means Episcopal churchwomen. In fact, it should include all the churchwomen, but some of them get the idea that we're exclusive, but we're not. We're supposed to be all working together. And we try to raise funds for different needs of the church, and we put on breakfasts and different functions to raise money. And then we use this money to support the church. And I've been treasurer there for about 20 years and about 15 years for the Altar Guild too. So,
what's the difference between the Altar Guild and the ECW?
Well, the Altar Guild tends to the communion needs, like we have to know what linen to put out and what colors to use on certain feast days and holidays, and what to keep things clean. We have to polish the brass and vacuum and light the candles, and there's a group of us that do that, and we each have a Sunday, one Sunday a month, and there's usually 2 people that work on the Alfreda weekend. And we're if like this week was my week, and we're responsible for any functions that are going on in the church from one Saturday to the next Saturday. Like, actually, it ends on Friday, but and we try to help each other out if we can. If somebody's unable to do their work.
In addition to being involved with the church, are you involved with the tribal operations at all?
Not anymore. I worked on the election board a couple times, but I always, I don't know, I get frustrated working like that because I always feel that we're not doing anything and we're getting paid for doing nothing. So
What about, seems like I can remember either your mother or your father worked for the tribe for quite some time, didn't they? As
No.
a tribal secretary or? No?
No.
Must have been a different, okay.
It was probably Chester's mother. She was tribal secretary for a long time.
Oh, okay, maybe that's what I'm
Mamie, her
thinking.
name was.
Okay.
No, my mother was never interested in holding any kind of office. She was more of a homemaker. She stayed home until she just, I guess her kids grew up, so she decided she wanted to do something. So then she used to do housework in town. Look at that. There used to be a bunch of women that did housework. They'd all get on that, what they call the work bus, out by, Oneida anyhow, and go to work for the different people in town doing their housework.
There's quite a few of them that did that.
Pardon me?
There was quite a few that did that.
Yes, and the reason why I did that too is because I could be home when my kids got home. You can kind of pick your hours.
Yeah.
And it was always important to me that someone was home when the kids got home. Even though they're my kids, their father worked right where we lived, so, and he was always available there. So, but they gotta have mama, when they come home from school. I can remember when I was going to school and I'd get home and my mother wasn't home, I'd feel real lost, and sometimes I'd be even crying. Nobody home. But usually they let me know where they had gone, but it's just the idea of coming home to an empty house.
It's still hard, sure. Now, during the course of your lifetime, you've seen a lot of changes here in Oneida from when you were a little girl to your present day. Why don't you kind of share with us some of the most important things that you've seen changing, and some of the things that you'd hope to see changing or making what you'd like to see maybe in the future?
Well, I think housing is really made an impact on me, that they're able to build houses where people that don't have houses or never had any incentive to get a house of their own or to even take care of anything because they didn't own it. And I think the way they're stressing education is very important to the community. And the way the roads are kept up, it's really great. I think they've done wonderful work. And the care that they give, the care and respect the elders get in Oneida is really important.
Do you think it's a good?
Yes, I do, because some of us, I think, get spoiled. We expect too much.
Well, maybe you got it coming.
Well, I don't know, but in our home, the way I was raised, that we were all taught that we had to take care of ourselves. There's no free lunch out there. That if you raise kids, my dad always said, if you want to raise kids, you should take care of them. Don't expect somebody else to do it. Go out there and work and take care of your family. And like I said, I don't remember my mother having to work, and it really amazes me nowadays to think that people seem like the more you give them, the more they want.
There are some like that, yes.
Mhm. But it's really great that we're able to have the things that we do. I think it is, especially like the health center and our dentists and our doctors. And when I see some of the people that are non-Indians that are overwhelmed with medical bills and everything like that,
It's scary.
to
Mm-hmm.
think that they have to pay for their medical bills out of their Social Security because there's so many budget cuts, and I think that isn't right.
No, no. What
And-
kind of advice are you going to give to your grandchildren or the children that are out there today?
I would say that the same advice I was given, you don't get anything for nothing, that you have a responsibility to the community and to your families, as well as whoever lives around you, to support and help them as much as you can. And another thing I wanted to say is I think it's really great to have our driveway blacktop. I didn't think we'd ever have that driveway that was blacktop. I mean, I never even thought about it, you know. You think, well, so-and-so's got their driveway blacktop. Well, we got ours is gravel, so we can get in and out anyway, so what's the difference, you know? I never thought that someday we'd have a blacktop
So you
driveway
got a
too.
blacktop
Oh
driveway?
yeah, and it's really wonderful to think that you don't have to be dragging through the mud all the time.
Good, good.
I really appreciate it.
Is there anything that I may have not covered that you might want to share with us?
No, I guess not.
No?
No, not that I can think of. I'll probably think of something after I get
That's
home.
all right, that's all right. Now, all I want to say is we appreciate you coming, even though it took us 3 times to get you. But sometimes the 3rd time's the best.
Well, hopefully it will be.
And
I-
we'll get you a videotape of this, the conversation here. I want to thank you.